Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Bookshelf Odyssey podcast. And I'm joined again tonight with Carol, who is going to bring us her thoughts on the book and on the chapters this week. So, Carol, welcome back.
Hi, thank you, Art. Thank you.
I have ulterior motives to having you back on because the download numbers for the episode you were on were like double of my normal numbers. So.
Oh,
you're my good luck charm. So, but today we're going to be looking at chapters 30 through 33 of Great Expectations. And you could say that today we're going to the theater today. we're gonna watch a play and all sorts of kind of crazy adventures Pip gets into these chapters. My overall thought of this is like these chapters, there's not a lot of big revelations or anything like that, but I feel like Dickens is laying down some things that are going to come out in the end, or that he's starting to weave his plot together, and I don't know, just a sense I have right now. So, but what did you overall? What did you think about these chapters?
well, three of them I enjoyed. One of them I did not,
Okay.
but I'll
Well,
reserve that.
I can't wait to find out which one. Yeah. Well, last week I had asked some questions about. We got a couple of characters' views of love. We got a description from Pip, and we got a description from Miss Havisham. And I threw the question out: what did you guys think about their view of love? And Deborah from I think it's Bookin with Deborah is her YouTube channel. She on our Voxer channel left a lovely comment. So if you're not following us there, please jump over. But she said that she thought that Pip's love for Estella, it's more of he's in love with what she represents. That she represents this ideal of this aspirational life. That she's like the embodiment of everything he's been trying for. And so it could be that he's more in love with her as an idea than as a person, which I think is similar to what I had thought. I loved how she described Miss Havisham's idea of love, and she says that's not what love is to me. I mean, not at all. you know, and I think they both have some misguided views of love. And Carol, I don't know, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
Well, I would agree. I think though that Miss Havisham is working through her trauma
Mm-hmm.
with love through these two young people. And I think that a lot of relationships start with a very superficial physical attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And if it develops into something more, it may become more lasting. But if it doesn't last. And I think they're both young enough that they're learning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's because with Miss Havisham, it's easy to paint her as a villain, but I'm really noticing that even this time around, the sympathy for her, I think that, I mean, she's been traumatized, she's experienced trauma, and that will leave a mark. Um, and I think we discussed even in the earlier chapters, Mrs. Joe, she had been traumatized. I mean, her entire family, but Pip, is dead, and that's going to mess you up. It's going to hurt. So I understand that. I maybe I'm having a little more sympathy for them this time around. But that's what I love about classics, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, is that they almost invite multiple readings so that you can dig deeper and deeper into these characters, and you learn more and more about them. Well, and then on top of all that, Pip is poor, was poor, and I know what that's like, when you don't have something and you just the solution to my problem is money. If only I had money, I could get out of here and make something of my life. And that's not the case necessarily. Money helps. If somebody wants to offer me expectations, I'm not going to turn them down. but Feel free to send any my way, anyone. But it's that desire to make yourself better. It's a good goal. It's just as we've said, you can't do it at the expense of your character. So again, if you're following along on the YouTube videos, there's been some great comments left. As I mentioned, Deborah's been catching up and she's been leaving comments. So you should go back and see what she wrote and interact with her. I think it would be worth your time to do that. And others are starting to catch up, and we're hoping to have some more guests on in the upcoming episodes. So, but Carol's back with us again tonight. Thank you again, Carol. This has been a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started on chapters 30 and 31. We'll see what Pip's up to in this week's chapters. We start off with Pip. He had run into Orlick again at Miss Havisham's, and he mentions to Mr. Jaggers that Orlick was not a very good fella. And long story short, he ends up getting Orlick fired, which I'm sure Orlick will handle with all the grace and dignity. We'll have to see if that comes into play later. But I like what Jagger says about Orlick right off the bat there in about the middle of the first paragraph, because Pip has told him he's not the right sort of man for that job, and Jagger says, "Why, of course he's not the right sort of man, Pip," said my guardian, comfortably satisfied beforehand on the general head, "because the man who fills the post of trust never is the right sort of man." He just has such an interesting perspective on people, that especially the unsavory ones, it seems like he just seems attracted to them or surrounds himself with them. It's interesting. So then as Pip is walking through town, his old place where he used to live, he begins to be mocked by Trab's boy, the tailor's assistant, if you remember him from previous chapters. And we have about a page and a half of descriptions of Trab's boy just walking around, mocking him, making fun of him. And one thing I read said, you can't really blame him because, he might have a point because Pip has been kind of stuck up lately. This other quote, as he's leaving town, he doesn't go to see Joe again. He said he had planned to, but then after what Estella had said, he thought, it's very unlikely I was going to go anyway, but now I'm definitely not going. So instead it says that as soon as I arrived, I sent a penitential codfish and barrel of oysters to Joe as reparation for not having gone myself, and then went on to Bernard's Inn. And I have a footnote that says, at the time, oysters were not a delicacy, but rather part of the poor man's diet. And so that got me thinking, see if you thought about it. Is Pip being dismissive of Joe? Like he could have sent something nicer, but chose to send something poor? Or would he know that after everything Joe has told him, he wouldn't have accepted a nice gift anyway? So I'm just going to send him this barrel of oysters. So I wasn't quite sure where to fall on that one. I don't know if you had thought about it at all, but yeah, I don't know. To me, it almost seemed like just an offhanded gift that, hey, you're poor, you like oysters, here you go, here's a barrel of them.
Mhm. Yep. When he could have done better.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
One of the things that stuck out to me is that he said that he has done nothing to raise myself in life, and that fortune alone has raised me. That is being very lucky. I cannot tell you how dependent and uncertain I feel, and how exposed to hundreds of chances.
Hmm.
I wonder if that statement is tied into your observation about the oysters. And,
Well,
I guess I was thinking perhaps because they are poor, they're not accustomed to preparing higher class food. They may not have known what to do with other food,
hmm.
or it could have been a slap in the face.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah, I was thinking about A Christmas Carol, which I usually am thinking about that one, but at the end where Scrooge sends the Cratchits a turkey, which was, if I remember right, that's actually a higher quality of food than the goose, and would have been considered a very wealthy kind of meal. And so I'm comparing these two together right now, Pip and Scrooge, and what Pip sends here. And I know it's different context and everything, but maybe he could have sent something nicer. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking on that one. So yeah, if anyone's got any thoughts on that, let me know. I'd be interested to hear what you say. But yeah, I think we haven't seen Pip behaving his best lately, so I'm hesitant to say this was a good thing he did. Obviously, it'd be better for him to show up himself.
Yeah.
Uh, y- you know, if I'm just thinking of my own kids, and I know Pip is sort of adopted by Joe, but still, it's like he's like a son, and to have my son in town and not stop to visit, but just send, you know, a small meal or something my way, I'd be hurt. Like, hey, come on, you could have come and seen me.
Mhm.
But my son's been good at that, so don't worry. But he stops it when he's in town. So not to get sidetracked on oysters, but okay, I gotta just ask: have you ever had oysters before?
Yep.
Are
I
they?
like
Do you like
I
them
like
or
I like smoked oysters.
okay? I I had I've had them. Well, clams. I guess there's not really much difference. I don't know, but well, no, maybe there were oysters. I don't know. I couldn't get past the sliminess, and my grandma would try to either bake them or fry them or whatever, and it's just no, they're just chewy. And
Or oyster stew at Christmas time?
no, yeah, I've never had that. Yeah,
Okay.
although I've had clam chowder, and I like clam chowder. Like the couple times I've had it, that's really good. So don't maybe if it just needs to be buried in ingredients, and if I can't taste them, I'm the same way with mushrooms though. So
Sure.
as long as I don't taste them, I think I can get them down. Then we have this part that I really was laughing over because Pip confesses, surprising no one, that he confesses to Herbert that he says, I adore Estella. And instead of being transfixed, Herbert replied in an easy matter of course way, exactly. Well, and he says, well, Herbert, is that all you say? Well, what next? I mean, said Herbert. Of course I know that. And I have to comment, everybody knows that. You're bad at keeping secrets.
And then
Uh,
they have to compare notes about how he knew that.
right. Pip's surprised that Herbert knows he's in love, and he said, "Told me you have never told me when you've got your hair cut, but I had senses to perceive it." And I like that. It's like, yeah, we could tell. When he says later, and he says, and yet when I think of Estella, and Herbert jumps in with a, and when don't you, Just some great Dickensian humor there. Herbert's point is that he doesn't think Estella is meant for Pip. That there's money, and I guess if I understand the conversation right, there's maybe property or something, but Estella has never been mentioned, and he's saying, I don't think she was meant for you. And of course, Estella, every time Pip sees her lately, as we'll see again in this chapter, she's basically warning him away that I'm a terrible person, or I'm very cold and have been trained to be this way. But he's in love, so we don't always think with our heads. And then we find out that Herbert also confesses his attachment to a young lady named Clara, and they're either she or they are both too poor to marry. I like what he says. Herbert says about his mom's opinion. He says, perhaps I ought to mention, said Herbert, who had become curiously crestfallen and meek since we entered on the interesting theme, that, and this is talking about his mother, but or Clara, that she is rather below my mother's nonsensical family notions. you know, and we were talking about her. I think that on the chapter you were on when you were on last, and how she just has these grand visions of herself, and now my son wants to marry a poor woman. What's going on? Yeah, she's definitely beneath her mother's
Yep.
nonsensical family notions. Yeah.
He
Mhm.
mentions arranged marriages too.
Mhm.
There was a small discussion about that.
Yeah, didn't he say like pretty much everybody but the baby was engaged, or is that, am I thinking of a different book? Yeah,
No, no,
it
that's
was
this
this
one.
one.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah. That's what happens when I'm reading multiple things. That sometimes the storyline gets mixed up. But yeah, I thought that was great. The whole idea even of arranged marriages, I don't know, to me it curdles my hair. But uh back then, again, it, you had to marry wealthy or you could be in trouble, especially for women. We look at it as, oh, it's a love story, two people fall in love and get married, but part of it is too a necessity that I can't work, so I need to marry a rich husband so they can support me, or I can bring my riches into the wedding or to the marriage, and then we'll have twice the amount, and I can be secure for my life should anything happen, to her husband. Yeah, there's a lot behind it other than just, oh, I fell in love,
Yep.
which makes me want to go back to Christmas Carol again, when Scrooge asks Fred, "Why did you get married?" He says, "Because I fell in love." And to him, that's a ridiculous reason because it's about money. That's why you get married.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the beginning of the book
Hmm.
when we talked about Mrs. Joe
Hmm.
and Joe and how they got married. It
Yeah.
didn't seem to be for love. It seemed to be for necessity.
Right. And I've been thinking on that. It's possible uh, Joe had love for Pip, or at least concern, and he
Yep.
thought, if I marry this woman, then I can adopt this little baby as her own and help her with that. Yeah, there's details there I'd like to see filled in. I don't know if we'll get it. Okay, so that brings us to the end of chapter 30. So I wanted us to kind of change things up tonight, and I'm going to have Carol, I'm going to have you kind of walk us through chapter 31 and see what you thought of it.
So Art gave me the tough chapter out of all four of these. And he may have to throw me a lifeline here. I'm not
Okay,
sure.
no problem.
But chapter 31 is it was a very difficult chapter for me to read.
Hmm.
And I'll talk more about that. But basically, Herbert and Pip go to the theater and they watch Wopsle play a ridiculous Hamlet. And I don't know if it was meant to be comical or if they were just that poor of actors.
Mm.
But the crowd was laughing at them and poking fun and all of that. One of the phrases that stuck out to me makes this a difficult chapter to read. This is all one sentence.
Mm.
The Queen of Denmark, a very buxom lady, though no doubt historically brazen, was considered by the public to have too much brass about her, her chin being attached to her diadem by a broad band of that metal, as if she had a gorgeous toothache, her waist being encircled by another, and each of her arms by another, so that she was openly mentioned as the kettle drum. That's all one sentence. And then the one behind it is even worse. The noble boy in the ancestral boots was inconsistent, representing himself as if he were in one breath as an able seaman, a strolling actor, a grave digger, a clergyman, and a person of the utmost importance at a court fencing match, on the authority of whose practiced eye and nice discrimination the finest strokes were judged.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that whole chapter was like that. And
Hmm.
it made it hard for me to read.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, especially if you're not familiar with the play of Hamlet, you, you can get lost, and
Yeah.
that's where reading classics sometimes can derail people, is because they don't have that context. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
I even dug out an audio book just to listen to that chapter so
Oh,
that I could understand it better, and it
mhm.
still was hard.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad to see that you tried. That's good. That makes me happy. So good.
I'm not sure what significance that chapter plays in this book. I suppose
Yeah,
there is a reason,
yeah.
but
I think it's mostly filler, to be honest. Just some comic relief. Hamlet is a drama. You know, it's a very serious drama, and then to see them just acting like buffoons through all of it, it's it made me laugh. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. So I really don't have any redeemable things to say about that chapter.
Yeah. When he was writing in installments, he did have a certain like page number he'd have to write, and some weeks, he'd say it was really hard to some of the writings we have left. He's like, I had to go back and add a chapter because I didn't have enough paper I turned in or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Yep.
does, that chapter does not shine a good light on Wopsle at all.
Nope. There was a line I liked that near the beginning when it was describing the play. It says that the audience was involving themselves in the play, and it says, as for example, on the question whether 'twas nobler in the mind to suffer, some roared yes, and some no,
Oh,
and some inclining to both opinions said, toss up for
yep,
it. it I think that's the reference to that, to the line, to be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler and all that.
yep.
But I don't know, it's like Mystery Science Theater 3000, I think it's called, where they're basically watching these cheesy movies and hurling insults at the screen. Yeah,
I loved that show.
yeah. Yeah, it's good quality education there.
So
Well,
that was 31 in a nutshell.
yeah, yeah, there's not much there. Who knows? By the end of the book, we might find this was the most important chapter, but I what another part that stuck out to me was right at the end when he's having this bizarre dream of, or like playing Hamlet, and then Miss Havisham was a ghost, and he was doing it before 20,000 people, but then he forgot all the lines, and I'm thinking he's having a stress dream or something. That's classic stress dream. Yeah, that brings us to the end of part 19. It was published on April 6th in 1861. Again, not much of a cliffhanger there, but at this point, I'm noticing they're not as dramatic endings, but I'm still getting more and more compelled to read because I want to know the overall mysteries and things, but also I'm just really starting to enjoy the characters, whether I like them or not, but I'm enjoying what they're going through, and I want to see what happens next.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to assume that was the chapter you didn't care for then.
How could you tell?
Yeah. But yeah, I didn't do it on purpose, I promise. Uh, all right, chapter 32. We open up with another letter from Estella. This one's from Estella, and he said it had no set beginning, such as Dear Mr. Pip or Dear Pip or Dear Sir or Dear anything, but it was just brief and to the point, just she said she's coming to London, and she wants him to come and meet her. And all events, Miss Havisham has that impression, and I write in obedience to it. She sends you her regard, yours, Estella. Basically saying, I'm going to be here. You're going to pick me up, and I'm sure that's what Miss Havisham would want you to do. Like, well, I can't say no now. Not that he would have, because I'm beginning to suspect he might have feelings for her. So, but yeah, he goes to meet Estella. He he shows up really early. What was it, like 5 hours early or something?
Yes.
And
Yep.
yeah, he runs into Wemmick, and they do this. They do a tour of Newgate Prison, which seems odd, but that was a thing they did back then, is they would tour prisons. Dickens would do that. He would get tours of prisons and asylums, sanitariums, I guess they called them back then. I know when he came to the United States on one of his tours, he did that. He and one of the local police would go and tour a prison in an asylum, and then he'd write about the conditions they were in. And um, some were good and some were very poor, and he'd, he'd get furious over the mistreatment of people, and would write about it and want something to be done about it. But I guess that's what you do. And if you don't have television, I don't know. Hey, let's go check out the jail. I can imagine though parents bringing their kids along and saying, "See, this is where you're going to end up if you don't behave yourself."
I hope not.
Yeah, you better watch it.
Yeah. I think their standard of prison back then was very filthy,
Mm-hmm.
very dirty. The
Yeah.
the one comment that jumped out at me is that when they were done at the prison, and he was waiting for Estella again, he said that he felt contaminated.
Mm. He tries to shake the dust off of himself. Here it says, I beat the prison dust off my feet as I sauntered to and fro, and I shook it out of my dress, and I exhaled its air from my lungs. So contaminated did I feel, remembering who was coming, that the coach came quickly after all, and I was not yet free from the soiling consciousness of Mr. Wemmick's conservatory, when I saw her face at the coach window and her hand waving to me. And then again, we get this cryptic statement: what was the nameless shadow which again in that one instant had passed? And I think it's a reference back to chapter 29, when he asked, when he was with Estella, and there was something about her that was familiar to him. So now I'm really starting to track that question now. You better deliver on that one, because it's catching my attention.
So who do you think it reminds him of?
I'm terrible at guessing mysteries, so I don't know. I thought at first maybe it was Miss Havisham that she was reminding him of, but I think Dickens was making that clear that they're, she's adopted. She's not, like, I thought, is she actually Miss Havisham's daughter? I can't remember. There's like a blank in my head. I don't know. I'm just guessing in the dark right now. But it's something or someone he knows, that there's something about her that reminds him of her, or her of them, or something. Did I make sense? Yeah.
So I have not read the book before, and so this is a stab in the dark, but I think that it reminds him of Belinda Pocket.
Hmm.
Belinda has that attitude that people owe her something, or they need to take care of her, or she is meant for a higher station in life.
Mm.
And that's kind of how Estella comes across too.
And that's how Pip comes across. Definitely.
So
You know.
maybe it's a reminder of
Oh,
himself.
oh, there you go. Yeah. Maybe he's seeing himself reflected in her.
Maybe so.
Wow. Well, if anyone knows, don't tell us. We're there's in some way they are very similar in some ways. We'll have to put a pin in that and come back to it now. He says that he consumed the whole time in thinking how strange it was that I should be encompassed by all this taint of prison and crime, that in my childhood, out on our lonely marshes on a winter evening, that I should have first encountered it, that it should have reappeared on two occasions, starting out like a stain that was faded but was not gone, that it should in this new way pervade my fortune and advancement. He's, and he's right. There's an awful lot of criminals that he is becoming connected to, and then he gets in the prison, and again it's like, oh, it's on me. The germs are on me, the dust is on me, and he's trying to wipe it away, but he can't seem to do that. And I think maybe it ties back in with when he was a kid, and just the guilt he had and the fear he had, and of because he helped this criminal, that some would see it as, a an act of compassion that he did,
Mhm.
or at least an act he did out of fear. Um, I don't think anyone would blame him, for sure, or call him a criminal if they were being fair anyway. I mean, he was threatened, and when you're 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, um, yeah, that's gonna. I don't know. I wouldn't convict him if I were a jury. So, um, yeah, he's just carrying this with him, and that's the part that saddens me, is that he's still, I think, carrying this guilt, and that maybe if he can learn to throw off this guilt, that he can really make strides to becoming a good man. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. So, all right. Well, we get to chapter 33. I'm going to hand it back over to Carol, and this chapter might be a little more enjoyable for us.
It was a good chapter.
Yes.
I think this is what left us with something to think about. In chapter 33, Pip escorts Estella around the community, shows her some of the sites in London, they went to see the cheap site, right?
Mhm.
Or cheap side.
Yeah.
Um, but they didn't go into the cheap side, they just saw it. He truly thinks that he's in love with her. I think we see a little bit more about who Estella is. And so where I take that from is she says, I'm going to Richmond, she told me. Our lesson is that there are two Richmonds, one in Surrey and one in Yorkshire, and that mine is the Surrey Richmond. The distance is 10 miles. I am to have a carriage and you are to take me there. This is my purse and you are to pay my charges out of it. Oh, you must take the purse. We have no choice, you and I, but to obey our instructions. We are not free to follow our own devices, you and I, which
Mm.
begs to say that somebody is controlling their lives right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we guess it's Miss Havisham, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lady who adopted her, and that is who he thinks his benefactor is. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that she is intentionally throwing them together, molding them the way she wants them to be. But even Estella recognizes that and
Mm-hmm.
says so.
We are not free to follow our own devices, you and I. Yeah. So somebody's pulling the puppet strings.
Which makes it kind of sad.
Yeah.
Even even though we don't like some of Estella, it's sad that she is not free to be her own person.
Mm-hmm. Some ways too, that it's sad, because if that's the case, maybe even Pip's money was given to him just as a way of controlling something, which then makes that sad, because it's not necessarily having a good effect on him, and he could potentially turn out to be a pretty wretched person. Uh, yeah.
And even deeper than that, he wasn't good enough without the money.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That's very sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way he thinks that of himself. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Uh,
he did talk about that in the first chapter we discussed tonight when
mhm.
he said fortune had raised him, made him fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's sad. Now I'm sad.
It is sad, but it's
Yeah.
something deep to think about. We
No,
haven't,
it
I
is.
mean,
Yeah.
after chapter 31, this one is
This one's got
much,
some meat to it. Yeah.
yeah, it does. It does. And then there's an exchange toward the end of the chapter between the two of them where he wants to kiss her hand and she's poking fun at him.
Mhm.
That didn't he learn his lesson the first time? And then um, she allows him to kiss her cheek. It is not easy for even you, said Estella, to know what satisfaction it gives me to see those people thwarted, or what an enjoyable sense of the ridiculous I have when they are made ridiculous. So she gets some pleasures out of seeing other people mocked or poked fun of.
Mhm.
For you were not brought up in that strange house from a mere baby. I was. You had not your little wits sharpened by their intriguing against you, suppressed and defenseless under the mask of sympathy and pity and what not that is soft and soothing I had. You did not gradually open your round childish eyes wider and wider to the discovery of that impostor of a woman who calculates her stores of peace of mind for when she wakes up in the night. I did. So she talks about growing up in Miss Havisham's home, and
Mhm.
it's not been wonderful either.
I mean, Miss Havisham is miserable, and it sounds like she makes everyone around her miserable.
Yep.
And
And then Pip says, "It was no laughing matter with Estella now, nor was she summoning these remembrances from any shallow place. I would not have been the cause of that look of hers for all of my expectations in a heap." So he realizes that unhappiness in her
Mhm.
and that it goes pretty deep.
Is that the part where he then kisses her hand
Yep.
and he says and she says, "You ridiculous boy, will you never take warning, or do you kiss my hand in the same spirit in which I once let you kiss my cheek?" Uh, again, she's warning him, like, just. But then, it does it contrast with what she says that that we have a we are not free to follow our own devices. So it's like there's a conflict there. I don't know what you call it, but yeah, she's trying to warn him away, but then also there's nothing we can do about it.
Yep. Yep. But then he decides to take a chance and say, "Well, if he says so, can he kiss her cheek?" And she lets him.
Hmm.
And so he does.
Hmm. Yeah, you bet.
I really did like this chapter. I think
Hmm.
that it goes deeper and it tells us a little bit more about these two.
But when I finished, I read them and I thought, oh, I want to read more. you know, maybe I could just sneak in chapter 34 and see what happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I enjoyed this chapter. There was something to it. I think it's going to take us on to the other chapters.
For me, the parts you pointed out are ones that caught my attention too. But I was really heartbroken at the end when Pip just wants somebody to talk to, and Mr. Pocket was gone. I don't think Herbert was around, and Mrs. Pocket. He said, but happening to look up at Mrs. Pocket as she sat reading her book of dignities after prescribing bed as a sovereign remedy for the baby, I thought, well, no, I wouldn't. He just wants to talk to someone about all that he's going, what he's feeling, what happened, all this, and he's got no one
Mhm.
right now, and that's hard.
So the morals that he was raised with, that Joe and his sister taught him,
Hmm.
really are still there, and they're conflicting with what's going on in his life now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I think he's gonna make the right decisions.
We root for him, but it's I don't say it's enjoyable watching him go through it, but it's kind of an odd perspective that we're here watching him, like somebody
Yeah.
watching your life and criticizing you for mistakes you make and this and that. And, you know, generally speaking, the stories, it's going to be a happy ending, right? Or we know the story, this or that's going to happen. But when you're in the story, you don't.
And it's painful. It's
Yeah.
painful to grow,
Yeah.
and I think he's feeling that.
Yeah. 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 This is where this part didn't register that strongly with me until now as an older father. I don't say older father. I mean, my kids are teenagers and my oldest is in college, but um, as a father now reading that and thinking of my kids who feel lonely or hurting and
Yeah.
having nobody to talk to, that grieves me. And so then watching Pip go through that, I'm just like, oh, you poor boy. you
Mm.
you need a hug. Okay.
But the Pockets never struck me as this warm, super loving family. It was just chaos and playing, but the
Yeah.
adults, there didn't seem to be a lot of nurturing going on.
Yeah. About the only nurturing we really saw is Joe and Pip. And I mean, and he was friends, I think, with Biddy. Although I always felt like he was maybe using her more for to help him get what he wants. That he wants her to teach him to be a gentleman and that sort of thing. But Joe might not have, the intellectual wisdom of a gentleman, but he's got good character, he's got empathy, he's got compassion, and those things can go a long way in uh,
Mhm.
helping someone flourish.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think Pip will realize that
yeah, yeah.
before the end of the book. I think we're going to see that come full circle. I could be all wrong, but that's what I'm
Yeah. No, I mean that's part of his journey, right? Is
yeah.
learning who he or is growing up and facing those challenges and learning those lessons. I just again, I just want to encourage folks, if you're reading and you're struggling with understanding it, Carol did a great thing of going back and rereading it, get an audiobook. I still do that sometimes, and like, okay, I'm missing something here. Because we're reading a book, uh, you know, written 160 years ago, we're gonna miss some of that, and it's. I think one advice somebody gave me once is to just keep reading, and a chapter might not make sense, but it might become clearer later, and sometimes that helps. Or it could be like in this case where you could take the chapter out and you won't even miss it. So Dick Dickens sure liked his descriptions. That scene where he and Estella were in the at the train station and they were wanting some tea, and the guy, he just spends all this time describing the room they're in and all these things the guy is bringing in, and finally the tea arrives and it's like these sticks and water, and it's just so descriptive, maybe unnecessarily so, but I chuckle over those parts. They just delight me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is some compassion and sensitivity in some of the things that he writes.
Hmm.
I pulled that out in this last chapter. He was very accommodating between those two.
Hmm.
That felt very nice and warm as compared to what was in 31.
Yeah. Carol, once again, thank you for coming on. And everyone, if you're caught up and reading along with us and want to be on next week, let me know. And typically, Thursdays work really well to record. Sometimes in an evening or afternoon, uh, I can be pretty flexible. So we'd love to see your bright shining faces here. All right. Well, with that, next week's readings will be 34, and I didn't write it down.
37.
34 through 37. So it's another four chapter one. So I can't say this enough. I am enjoying reading with all of you so much. This has made this book come alive in a way that I haven't experienced before. So thank you for doing that, Carol. Thank you for all your great thoughts, and Deborah and others I know have been chiming in, and I can't think of all your names right now, but it means the world to me. So thank you so much for that. I guess until next time, then, everyone, do your homework and read the next chapters, and we will talk to you again soon.
Bye.
Bye bye.